And I always say when I go into interviews, when you're trying to sell yourself, everyone's so different. But I always finish the interview in a very confident way, put down my CV and I say, the proof is in the pudding. Let's see. So until you've cooked for them, they don't know.
Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hannes Henschel, and on our show we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. I'm your host, Hannes Henschel, and today's guest is Samantha Kennedy, an experienced private chef from the London, UK area. She's had quite a ride in the last week itself, so she's looking forward to having an entire month off, which after such a busy holiday season is really something. So welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So what brought you into the kitchen originally? Where does the love for cooking come from?
Well, it's all quite idyllic. I was brought up in a restaurant. So from the age of 6, my mother had a French restaurant, and she had these women that worked for her. They were all kind of wartime beauties, and they'd learned how to cook with rations and at the worst times. But it was a lovely way to be brought up, and I always wanted to work there after school. It was kind of clear which way my life was going to go.
It was all predetermined already.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. And I found the whole thing kind of fascinating. So that's where it all began, really. I was very young, and my mum's a very good chef.
So did you always cook alongside your mom afterwards, or when did you start venturing out into maybe restaurants or different households to kind of make your own mark in the chef world?
Well, I'm from a small town called Hastings, and I then went off and I was the head chef, lots of different places. I mean, this is the greatest thing about the industry, is everywhere you work is so very different. And as time went on, I was working somewhere that was very organic. You could write the menu, make it up as you went along. But they changed the owners, and it all became 2 meals for £15. And I started making the same thing over and over again, and realised this wasn't, I didn't enjoy it anymore. A friend of mine, he was a chief steward on important boats, and he said to me, why don't you become a private chef? And, so it's not an easy industry to get into, as I'm sure you know, but I went for my first private chef job. I got it. They called me Mary Poppins, because I was very happy to do everything. But what I loved about it is you write a menu every day, and you're not making the same thing unless they request it. You're making something different every day. Keeps things really interesting.
So what was that shift like for you? You got the first private chef position full-time right away, without kind of the chicken and the egg hustle that we see these days, that you don't get the job without private experience, but nobody's giving you the private experience.
It's very difficult to do so, but the references that I had been doing private events in Mayfair, but just like single events here and there. And I think we all exaggerate a little bit to get to where we need to be. But once I'd done that first private chef job, I'm quite good at interviews, you could probably tell. But once I'd done that first private chef job, it was I had that really good reference. They're a lovely family. I mean, I went to their daughter's wedding. So I'm quite a personal chef. Like I'm not the most formal of chefs. I can be, but once I had that reference, It was gold dust. So actually, to be fair, I don't think it was that hard. I decided it was what I wanted to do, and I went home and created a portfolio, and just cooked for ages. I went and bought like different plates, and tried to exaggerate what I had. But now I don't need to exaggerate. And I always say when I go into interviews, when you're trying to sell yourself, everyone's so different. But I always finish the interview in a very confident way, put down my CV and I say, the proof is in the pudding. Let's see. So until you've cooked for them, they don't know.
It's true, but you also got to have that confidence to the moment, where you're like, the proof is in the pudding. Not everybody pulls it off in an interview like that.
Yeah, I think it can't be stolen. This is my thing. But it's true. You can show anyone any picture, you can show any reference, you can show any CV, but until you cook for someone, you could be the best chef, but it doesn't mean that family are going to like you or your food. And that's in your home as well. You're going into someone's house.
Yeah, there's also a component where you might be the best chef and you might actually be a good fit, but because of how you present yourself in the interview, you might not even get a chance to cook for them. For the maybe less confident individuals, and then they sit there and they fiddle with their fingers.
Exactly. So it's so much more because you're in their house. And they've seen 200 chefs. You know, you have to have something that makes you stand out a bit. And but some people don't want you to have a character. They want you to be in the background, very quietly, part of the furniture, and that's also fine. But it's about the fit. You have to have the right person if they're going to be in your home around your kids. You know, you need to feel comfortable with them, and so it's much more than just cooking. It's fitting in, and that's also the staff. The staff might hate you, or you might hate them.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a fit all around. So how do you usually try to present yourself in an interview? Like you obviously you have that level of confidence and you want to make sure that you shine through a little bit as a personality without being too loud. How do you usually conduct yourself so that, you know, people get a sense of who you are as a person without being like, over the top?
You read your audience. You know, if you've got somebody that's wide-eyed, that's looking at you, that's sort of sitting on the edge of their chair, then you can sort of mirror them a little bit. I mean, I trained when I was younger to be a hypnotherapist, which has probably helped throughout this. But it's, you know, if someone's very laid back, don't be too enthusiastic. If someone is enthusiastic, you have to mirror them. And if anyone's ever been a bartender or a restaurant manager, it's the same kind of thing. Not everyone wants to talk to you. Not everyone wants to know your life story, for sure. But some people are interested. So you have to be able to gauge that you cannot give the same interview to every person. It has to be a totally tailored experience to read what that person wants.
Yeah. So it's really more about the cooking till here, like this entire process of getting someone hired, or at least to the actual interview process where you have a trial set up where you get to cook. It's more about the person or how you give yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first stage. The first stage is you, how you've presented yourself. You created an illusion of who you are, and the food comes next. I mean, it's not easy, when you're writing a menu for someone.
But it doesn't need to be it does need to be an illusion.
No, but it is kind of an illusion until you've pulled it off. Until you've demonstrated that's who you are, you can. And if you're too confident, it's kind of ugly, because you have to have a bit of space for doubt. You can't be too confident. It's you have to balance it right, especially as the British. We can't be too confident as British. We don't like that too much. We find that you have to be a bit reserved. Especially the people that you're cooking for, they are likely very rich. They've eaten all sorts of restaurants. They've met loads of chefs. You have to be something that you can relate to them. Yeah.
So when you went to put that first portfolio together, you literally did that at home or maybe for friends and family, and you just kept cooking till you had a proper portfolio that you could put forth?
Yes. To be honest, yes. This is a tip that I did because I didn't think you have to be an all-round. If you say to someone you're a chef, you have to have a portfolio. And if you've only just started in the position, or sometimes it's difficult to get those photos. You need those photos. So sometimes they have really ugly plates. You make this amazing dish and then you've got these gold swans dancing across a plate and it's just impossible to plate on that. So that's like the first part of it. And then other times, people are doing buffets, etc. So you decide how you want to present yourself. And I think I probably spent about £500, but I would make a single dish. And I've got the time. I can move this around this way. I mean, presenting a plate is a skill in itself. And I just stayed home for like a week and just cooked stuff, without any particular plan of even eating it, just to get it out for a portfolio. And my first portfolio was not nearly as good as the one I've got now, but the one that I've got now is much more on the job. But I had to be presented ready to go as a private chef, and as you say, it's really difficult to crack into that industry. You have to have the photos, you have to have the reference, you have to have the character, you have to have everything. Otherwise, why would they hire you? They'd hire someone else.
Yeah, and I think this is a crucial piece of action you took, and I encourage everybody who's listening. It's like, if you don't have the pictures, put in the week of work and get the pictures done, lock yourself up at home or invite a couple of friends over every night so that the food doesn't go to waste. But you have to get those pictures in. Because pictures tell the whole story. It's just like when people choose a restaurant, they look at the food photos first before they even bother reading the menu, maybe, or before they look up where the restaurant actually is. And I think it's similar when you hire a new chef. Food is such a visual thing that you can tell so much more than by reading a boring, curriculum or something, or even a cover letter at times. So it's so crucial to have that piece to the puzzle.
No, absolutely. I've spoken to chefs that have no photos, and would you buy a painting of someone that didn't have any pictures of their paintings? Like, you just wouldn't, it's necessary. I mean, when I did this as well, like a tip for somebody that's in the same position, I went to a charity shop and I bought maybe 8 single different plates. Because if you have the same plate and the same background, and so you have to, like I said, the illusion, that you've been doing this forever, and you get good at it on the job. But once you just go and spend a few pounds, get some different plates, make sure that you're really aware of that picture. Otherwise, you don't put it in. What's worse than no pictures is bad pictures. But get good at it. It takes time. Yeah. People that are going from a restaurant to a private chef, it's such a different world. And you're catering to people that don't have that budget, that have eaten all over the world. You have to make yourself a package. Yeah,
100%. And I like what you said about you can't put the bad pictures, because that's even worse, especially. But sometimes, and that's, sometimes people that just start doing things like taking pictures of their own food, they're like, oh, this looks fine. But then they don't know the level that they're catering to yet. I think that's one of the hardest things to solve for some of the new chefs. They don't even know what the level that they're in yet. And they don't know that some of the other portfolios, like mine, has professional food photography, because I made sure that whenever I do a consultant job or something on the side, that I get my dishes photography, and I can use those in the portfolio because they're dishes that I wrote or put together for those restaurants. So then I'm like, hey, this is part of my work too. But I have a professional setup, and they look just like in a magazine. And for someone who's starting out, that's kind of what they're competing with.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've never done this. I should do that. I'm a terrible photographer. I mean, I've got great photos, but it doesn't mean that I didn't take 50 bad pictures before I got to that one amazing photo. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I only just bought one of those photo boxes. Well, I just got it for Christmas, like just this year. The white photo box things. It makes every difference. But you have to get good at it. Take the bad pictures. And sometimes you're in the kitchen, you've got the downlighters, when that you make the perfect plate of food and you're thinking, right, I'll get a photo, but you don't know that kitchen. You maybe you're only in there for the day or a week, and you're trying to find a position, and the butler is looking at you like, let's serve, what are you doing? If you can, always make up extra plate of food, and then you can walk around and mess around, try and find the right spot and try and get that photo. But it does take time and research. There are all sorts of books on plating, presentation skills, looking at other people's portfolios. And like you said, if it's a bad picture, it's so much worse. Just don't do it. Even if you get yourself 4 good photos, it's better than 10 bad photos.
Yeah. That's true. And it's so much about the light. Like sometimes we're like indoors and we have these horrible colored lights and we just take a picture. Yeah. And it might even be an amazing dish in person, and it might even look great plated. But then later when you pull it up on a screen or you print it, you're like, this looks horrible because maybe the light, the food is off, the colors are off, and it's just better to not use them despite maybe having an attachment to that particular meal or dish in that moment.
Well, yeah, if it doesn't look super professional, just don't do it. If you had a dog grooming company and then you turned up with your dog and your dog's a complete mess, you have to, like, if you're a professional chef, your photos have to look like a professional chef, and it's just so important. Like, the photos are everything. But I will say I've worked for so many people and maybe their plates are incredibly expensive, but they are really ugly. And it's very hard. So you get this idea of what you're going to put on the plate and you've got the colours, everything's in your head. And then you walk in and you've just got these hideous plates, which probably are worth more than my car. But, it's you can't get that photo on there.
Yeah, I've been there. Like, and it's so funny because
you even turn up with your own plate sometimes.
They're like, you can use any of those plates. And I'm like, they're all ugly. Obviously, you can't say it, but...
And you're like,
they look like they're from King George himself or something.
No, you can't say it. You have to say, oh, this plate is beautiful. I've been places where you have to have a special fob to go into this room. There's all these plates piled up, things that are like solid gold, but it's not nice to make your food look good. It's all very impressive, but you're just hoping you can do buffet when the plates look like that.
I mean, that's actually another thing about how to serve food. Do you have any preference? Do you prefer like formal serving, or do you prefer buffet or family style? What's your favorite kind of day-to-day serving style?
Well, obviously the bonus of buffet is it's much quicker. And if you're serving a big bowl of something, but it doesn't look as pretty. You can add flowers or herbs or, put sliced tomato around it or whatever, but it's not usually as photo worthy. Quite a lot of people that have private chefs, they're not really looking for the fine dining experience. They're with their families, it's just informal family food. But for photo worthy, definitely you want a plate, because then you can take into account, hopefully you know what the plate looks like. We've got past what the plate's going to look like. But then you can think about the colours and where to place things. If it's buffet style, unless you've got an absolute banquet, which not everybody has for lunch on a Tuesday, it's more difficult. But I think that obviously plating, if you are in that position, and the more you do it, the more presentation skills you learn, the more pride you take in it. You start to really think about those extra little things that can add to that plate and make it more appealing. And I've been doing this a while and I'm always going to keep learning. There's so much more I could learn.
Yeah, I think that it's nearly, you can't pack into one life what can be learned around food and the kitchen. Like, it's the best of the best chefs. They're still venturing out into the world and they find new techniques and they find new ingredients, and it's just like this never ending adventure.
Yeah. You find these top chefs, once they've got their Michelin star, once they've done this, they just go traveling because they need to find something else. I've been saying this recently. There's not one person that couldn't teach you a different way of making eggs, a different way of making absolutely everything. Everyone has an opinion and everyone's opinion is valid. A chef that says there's one way of doing things isn't correct, in my opinion. I think there's a load of way of doing it. Everyone can teach you something. And food is so personal. Just because I think it's amazing, it doesn't mean that you'll think it's amazing.
Yeah, some people like soggy fries. It's not me, but there's people who love it this way.
Wrong with those people? It's especially as a private chef, how many people have you encountered? Like, I've had one guy that was genuinely scared of bananas, just couldn't even look at it, didn't understand it, didn't even want to discuss how much he disliked bananas. And, everyone's got such different things. A lot of people are against garlic or onion. And I'm French as well, so I want to put garlic in everything. But I just mean that everyone's completely different. How you would want your steak cooked, how much salt you would use. One person says you uses too much, the next person says you don't use enough. It just takes a bit of time to work out people out. And in a restaurant, it's super different. You're just pumping out the same thing to everyone. You've been making that same dish every day for months, so you're really, really good at it. Private chef, you might make a dish and you never make it again.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, I always tend to point out that in a restaurant, it's an expression of what the chef wants to cook, at least in a good chef-driven concept. And then in a private household, it's an expression of what the family wants to eat. And it's really not about the chef so much.
No. I mean, the first business card I had said Samantha Kennedy, private chef, tailoring to your taste. Because you have to change all your approaches, because this one doesn't like it spicy, this one doesn't like too much blood. And you just have to, it's not about how you think it should taste anymore, how you think it should look. It's about pleasing your diner. It's a much smaller target group. In one way, it's easier once you work them out, but working them out takes time. And so when you do the trial, it's really hard.
So how do you try to feel the waters? Like, let's say you're in the trial stage, you're ready to show the proof in the pudding. How do you figure out if this is someone in terms of flavor profiles and skill set that aligns with you?
It takes a bit of time. When you first do a trial, ideally you get like 2 days, because one meal doesn't really represent who you are. And, you're going in blind. Sometimes you've got a lot of information as to what they like, but you don't want to interview someone every time it's breakfast or every time it's lunch. What do you want to have for this? What do you want to have for that? The whole reason you are there is so they don't have to think about food anymore. So once you kind of worked out a bit what they like, how they like it, I always start with, if I'm doing a 2-day trial, I would give 3 choices for breakfast, 3 for lunch, 3 for dinner. It takes a bit more time to plan, but each time they make a choice, you learn a bit more about them. Especially if they say, we definitely don't want this, then it means it's such a massive scope. And it's, as I said, some people hate this, some people hate that. You just have to try to give them as much option as possible, but don't bore them. If they're having breakfast and you're talking to them about lunch, they start to dislike this. You don't want to talk about food all the time. And sometimes you don't get the feedback. Sometimes just them eating it is your feedback. You're only going to hear when something is bad, but you can't be disheartened by that, because you are their service that they're paying for. They're not going to come and give you a cuddle after the meal and tell you that you're lovely. It's not usually how it works. Sometimes it is, but not usually. So you have to learn to see between the lines. Look in their cupboards. If they've got loads of hot sauce, they're into spicy food. If they've got loads of cooking books, maybe they've got something that's more Thai or Vietnamese, and you can kind of gauge. You have to learn. It's like a detective. You have to learn as much about them as possible by asking as few questions as possible.
I like that. I like the way you put it, because that's really how it is. You want to make it as convenient as possible, almost like you seem to be a mind reader, and pick up on all the little things from the cookbooks that they have. And back to the illusion.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Try to gather all the information. And I think this is where staff in the house can be very helpful too.
Yes.
If there's someone who has been around for some time, they usually know.
But sometimes staff are great. Sometimes they've seen 15 chefs and they're bored of it, and they don't owe you anything. But if you can get on side with the staff, I always say this: I feed everyone, because you don't know when the security guard's going to help you But yeah, I probably don't tell the boss that as much. But it's very important. As well, I'd always ask the PA. They don't always give it to you, but quite often people that are waiting to get a chef, they order food in. So they use Deliveroo or whatever. Ask for their last 6 months of Deliveroo accounts. And then this way you can read the kind of things that they order. Not to necessarily copy it, but just to start understanding their palate and what they're looking for. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Ask the PA about Deliveroo.
Yeah, just to get an idea from their favorite restaurants. Like, hey,
Exactly.
If they've been ordering from a particular style of restaurant, let's say like maybe an upscale sushi place, and they've ordering different dishes, not just sushi there, that there is a certain umami flavor profile that they appreciate, and that there's certain ingredients that you can use because they're highly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see what they've already ordered. So that is a question that you didn't have to ask them. If you can just deliver them something that they think is delicious and you haven't quizzed them for 3 hours about it, they think, well, this person's good. they've just brought me exactly what I wanted. And the easier you can make it, seamless, but you need to answer those questions, and you have to be ready for the fact that you'll serve it and they'll be like, oh, I don't like that. And that's why I always try to give 3 options so they've got a better chance of choosing something they're actually going to want to eat. Because it's heartbreaking as a chef, is it not? When you serve something that someone doesn't want.
Yeah. And I think what's important at this stage is that for people who are not used to it, I don't like this doesn't mean I don't like you. And it's also, sometimes our skill set or who we are as a person is simply not for this family. And then we just need to be like, okay with it, which is a tough one to swallow at first, because especially when you want to land the first job, it's like, no, but I really need this income, or I need the job, or I want the job. And then it's like, not everything is a match made in heaven. And it's better to stick to the process and interview with other families than trying to force it, because if they don't appreciate who you are or the food you put forth, then I think it's best to move forward.
No, I completely agree. Because you always feel that you're only as good as your last meal. So I could serve something incredible for dinner last night. If I served lunch and it was a flop, it does affect your ego. But at the same time, if somebody said, top Indian chef, I would be an idiot to go for this job. I can make Indian food, but it's you can't read. Sometimes you can learn on the job. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think that a private chef with me, I wouldn't say that I'm incredible at anything, but I'm pretty good at all of it now. It's taken me a while to get to this stage. But, if you want somebody that is the best at this, then you probably just can't learn that on the job. And as you say, if you're not right, don't try to fit yourself as a square through a whole circle, It won't do anyone any favours, and they will see through your illusion eventually.
I mean, you can't pull off like a Japanese master sushi chef and just wing it. That's just not real.
It's true. That's true. I've winged some things in my time. I've had clients, especially at the beginning, ask me to make something, and then I would go and Google it and come back and make it. But and the last thing you want to do is say to your client, no. Like, no is a word that you avoid in our industry. But yeah, I think I've winged things a few times, but you certainly shouldn't have that every day. It's tiring. Stick to what you're good at and then get better at everything else.
Yeah, I think back in the days, it was even more important to know and to have recipes with you right then and there. But now everything has changed because we just have access to the internet all the time. And even if we're not really sure, we have access to information, and we can at least having basic understanding of how to make things. Like, okay, we can pull this off. Like, okay, this is the recipe, this is the structure. I think I got this. And then this is where times have changed a little bit. I mean, if you think about it, just 20 years ago, if you were in the kitchen and somebody asked you and you had no idea, it was rather tough to pull it together on the spot.
No, absolutely. I mean, I always say that the difference between a cook and a chef is a cook follows a recipe and a chef reads it. Once you know how food works, how things behave, how scientifically everything works, once you know how to cook, then you can quickly glance at a recipe and understand it. You're not learning how things work because you've been doing this a while. You are good at what you do, but you can't have all of these recipes in your head, especially as a private chef when you're making maybe 10 different dishes a day. You can't have all of those recipes in your head. And sometimes it's good to just have a look how other people have done things, and research. But yeah, you can't have, Google's an incredible thing. Google has saved me a lot. But then you go and work somewhere and they have no Wi-Fi and you're like,
That's true. If they set you up in a part of the house where you have no connection, you're doomed.
God. At the beginning, when I first started doing this, when I was a little bit, not nearly as experienced or confident as I am now, the client asked me to make something. I can't remember what it was. And I went to Google it. I couldn't believe it. I had no Wi-Fi. I was in some castle in Scotland, like holding my phone up, and then I had to just come and wing it, and it was okay. But yeah, we're very lucky with Google now. You know, people can you can do open heart surgery using YouTube if you absolutely had to.
Maybe now it's time for you to get
I wouldn't recommend it though.
a Starlink for your car. So next time you go to a castle in Scotland, you know, at least your car has Wi-Fi.
Yeah, maybe. But this was right at the beginning. This was my very next job after where they called me Mary Poppins. So I think it's pretty rare I need a recipe for anything now. To just make it up. The job that I just had was actually a joy because they didn't want a menu. You know, so they wanted an idea. And another piece of advice I would say as a private chef is tell them as little as possible. If you go right into this paragraph of how lunch is going to be, if you can say you're having chicken chasseur and just stop there, you know, because if you then say, oh, you're going to have it with this and this and this and this, you're then bound to serve all of those things. But if you just make it as simple as possible, you can add or detract, and they're not waiting for the buttered asparagus or whatever because they don't know it's coming.
You know, that's
it's a good piece of advice I was given. The less information they have, the better.
I think that's very true. And I think I just used to do it because I'm a bad salesperson on the spot. Like if you walk into the kitchen on me and you just ask me what's for lunch while I'm cooking it, it's not that I have some elaborate answer for you. No, I literally just say like, yeah, chicken with this or something. And then it's just, there's no solid expectations. And then occasionally, you know, I turn around like, oh, I forgot to put this on the plate, but nobody would know because I never advertised it.
But they didn't know. But this is, I've got a friend that's trying to get into the industry at the moment, and he's got the kind of, he's trying to make things overcomplicated. And this is the worst thing you can do, especially if you're not as experienced. You know, the less information they have, the less possible chance you have of disappointing them.
Yeah.
You know, if you've just completely burnt the carrots or whatever, and then they didn't know they were coming, you know, or there's this wonderful little addition that is now a surprise. Hurrah! You know, they didn't know it was going to be there. But if they're expecting it and you've just burnt it or forgotten to buy it or whatever,
you know,
it's best they don't know that.
I have a small story for this. It was a couple of years ago. It was a super busy holiday day. And without me having any notice, in the middle of the day, I decided to go on the open water. And so I had to set up everything for the boat as well, which I wasn't quite briefed on. So I was like pulling that together. But at the same time, we were supposed to have a bigger barbecue party at night. So I was pulling it all just together as fast as I could. And we came back from the boat in the afternoon, and I had to get the charcoal ready. And then suddenly they wanted to eat even earlier than before. And I didn't even have the charcoal going well yet. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just getting a nightmare. And obviously this particular day, there was almost no one around to help me. There was nobody. And so I was just running around like a lunatic already. But I also didn't say too much of what we had for barbecue in terms of proteins and everything. But I remember one of the principals walking past me, and he clearly saw the Wagyu steak. And it was there, you know. But then the other principal was like, oh, I want you to sear it like this on the open flame side right here. And I was like, it's going to burn. And it's just like, no, just put it there. It's fine. So I turned around. I had to run back to the kitchen, get something, but 30 seconds later I came back. Obviously it was completely burned. Also because the charcoal wasn't yet settled enough. And then I was just like, okay, today there's no Wagyu steak. And I threw it out. And I served everything else. And then somebody was like, oh, didn't we have some beef? And I'm like, no, there's no beef. then they just ate. And then somebody actually came. I was like, I thought I saw some steak earlier. Isn't there some steak? And I'm like, no, there is no steak today, you know? and they asked me like a third time. And I just...
You have to just poke a face.
And I just
what
very
steak?
firmly said, no, there is no beef, you know? And then obviously one or two of them saw it, but then there was just like, okay, now we asked 3 times. Let's just stay with there's no steak. But it was, the whole day I was running around like a lunatic, trying to get everything done. And then this one thing that wasn't served proper was like front of their memory, you know? And I'm like, do you realize what happened from breakfast,
That's how it always
lunch,
works.
afternoon on the boat, dinner? And the one thing you pull me up for is the steak. Like, really, can't you let that go? And just like, do you see everything else that was amazing today?
You had to say no, and that's the worst thing.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, but what about the chicken? The chicken's so good. Try the chicken. I was doing a job once somewhere in the Cotswolds, and suddenly, because everything can change, you know, one minute you're doing 4 people, tomorrow, the next minute, oh, darling, let's have a dinner party. And there's 20 people coming, and you've got to do that, and you just have to take that on the chin. And so I'm thinking, okay, because I don't like to say no. And I don't like to act like I need any help. It's a chef thing. I'm sure you're the same. And so I thought, okay, boeuf bourguignon. I can then serve this, 24 people, easy to serve, casserole, out. And I'm just putting together the shopping list. And the boss walks in, and he's decided that instead of the beef bourguignon, he has caught a salmon, and he caught it himself. You know, so this salmon's very important to him, and it's huge. Yeah, it's in the freezer. Right? So I have less than 24 hours. I have to get this salmon defrosted, and he wants it served, you know, with the mayonnaise and all the cucumber. Oh, and it's so big that they have like a very old style, like a kettle. I don't know if you know what I mean, like a long metal. It's like a long metal saucepan, long and thin, and I have to cook the salmon in this long metal saucepan, but the salmon's too big to fit in the saucepan, so I had to cut part of its tail off, which obviously is going to affect the way it looks. Anyway, so I put everything in, all the herbs and the wine, and I'm ready to make this and thinking, you know, I hope I can get this out quick enough. And then I go to put this thing, which weighs the size of like a 7-year-old, onto the cooker, but it's an induction hob. So it doesn't work. This thing is like from the early 1900s, this bloody kettle thing. So I then had to carry it to the staff cottage half a mile away to go and put this thing out. And it was just a nightmare, but I couldn't mess up the boss's salmon that he caught by hand in Scotland. And it all came together just at the last minute, but they don't know what goes into that, you know. And I said, because I should have said to him, no, sir, no. But I didn't. Instead, I've served it, and I think I nearly fainted afterwards. It was just done in time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes, I mean, we pride ourselves in them not knowing what goes into it. But at the same time, sometimes it's frustrating knowing
it's like a
that
swan.
they have no idea what they're asking for, and you know, the kind of workload is on the back of what they're like those. Oh yeah, we're just going on the boat and we're having a couple of friends coming, and then obviously you can do the whole barbecue later, right? No big deal. Yeah.
But they just, and this is the thing, when you're too good at what you do, they keep asking you for more. You know, if you're really, really good, and you always say, it's no problem, I don't mind, there's nothing too big. And then one day there is something too big, you know, and but you don't want to say no, because you want to be that person that can always deliver. So I don't know what advice I have on that, to be honest with you. I haven't changed. I'm not going to change.
I don't think there is advice.
No.
Because you also don't want to become incompetent on stuff so that nobody asks you anything anymore.
Exactly.
That's like, I always emphasize that whatever is going on, we should make the day more delightful. Like, it's about whatever is going on around me should be smoother because I'm there, even if it's not related to the kitchen.
Agreed. I mean, it's one thing that I pride myself in, especially the job that I just did. You know, a normal chef coming from a restaurant, they need to understand. You could be in the kitchen about to serve Lord and Lady of this or whatever, and then you've got 3 dogs biting your ankles. You know, and the dogs always like the chef because they think you're going to feed them. And then the kids, if you're too nice to the kids, which you must be nice to the kids, like always be nice to the kids. But when you're nice to them, they want to come and hang out. And you can't tell the boss's kid to get out or shut up. You can't do that. You have to be, as I said, that's why they call me Mary Poppins. You try to be a happy environment. You can't have an angry chef in your kitchen, throwing plates down and screaming that you can't find the mustard. You have to be a happy person all the time. Even when you've just burnt the beef or the salmon's not going to work, you have to just keep on smiling because they forgive you more. But yeah, you're on stage. You are on stage. And if you bring your bad mood into somebody's home, you can't do it. It's not like a restaurant. It's not.
Yeah, certainly not. No, nobody wants that. And I think that's one of the big distinctions to the restaurant environment. There's so much going on that you can let out in terms of anger or whatever in a restaurant kitchen. Maybe less so than back in the days, but that stuff has no place whatsoever in a private household.
You do not swear. You do not say no. You must, and especially be nice to the kids, be nice to everyone. And also, the better relationship you have with the nannies and the housekeepers, feed them, feed everyone, then everyone's going to be on your side. It's my opinion. Try and sneak little bits of food to the driver. If you sneak some food to the driver, he'll call you and let you know the principal will be back in 20 minutes because you've fed him. Be part of a well-oiled machine. People, if you feed the people, they will look after you.
Yeah, and I think that also makes the job so much more enjoyable if you're part of a well-oiled machine where everybody plays together. I think there's actually nothing worse than like if you're in a household where people know and they don't tell you. That's like as bad as it gets. If the team knows and you're just not being passed on the information for whatever silly reason, and then I'm just like, really, guys, we cannot take care of each other.
Well, this is why it's so important to be likable. If you have an angry, stroppy chef, sometimes, I heard of, it's a good story. So it was, I never worked there, but it's a Russian household. And every couple of weeks, they had two chefs, and they would make one of them head chef and the other one second chef. And they would just mess with it, because I think the boss believed that whoever was the head chef would try harder and whoever was the second chef would then have to move up a bit. But they did this. There was a British girl, and she'd gone in and she'd made, I think, the same salmon I'm talking about, with the cucumber and all of this. And the other girl that was working was annoyed because she's usually head chef. And so just as she was about to serve, she took a load of dirty oil and poured it all over her salmon, like this, to sabotage her meal. And I'm not saying that anybody is going to be in this position. It's very different, to have someone actively try to sabotage you. But you just don't know the household you're going into. Not everybody wants you there. You don't know why the other chef is gone. Maybe they don't want the chef to leave, or you just have to get on everyone's good side. The better relationship you have with the people you work with, the better everybody's going to be. The better the service will be, the better the food will be, the happier the boss will be.
Yeah. After going through all of this, you will know that it's so much less about the cooking skills. Like there's so much involved in this. This has little to do with the cooking. Like to make this work, it's so much more human based. Yeah.
And it's just experience. You need all of these experiences, good, bad, difficult, easy. You need them all because you learn from all of them. I'm so used now. I walk into a kitchen, I just go through every cupboard straight away. And I've got I must have a method now because the more I'm doing it, the less difficult things are. But you just have to be ready as you can. And I've had jobs where you spend all day making like a 7-course tasting menu, and then you see Pizza Hut walk past. You have to suck it up. It's up to them if they want to eat Pizza Hut. They don't care if you've just made the best creme brulee on the planet. It doesn't matter. They're having Pizza Hut, and you can't have a problem with anything. You just have to smile. And if people didn't enjoy it, as you say, chalk it up to experience. Tomorrow will be better.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think every experienced private chef shared the story that you just shared. The moment when we are like, why did I spend the whole day in the kitchen? You know, when you suddenly get, oh, can you put those, can you put the sushi on the platter so they can share it upstairs? And I'm like, oh, so we're not having dinner? Yeah.
The job that I just did, I had a big plan for the evening. It's all good. And then the boss just comes back with a piece of fillet steak, as long as my arm, wanting beef Wellington on the day before Christmas Eve. You know, and of course you want it to be perfect. These people have had the best beef Wellington in the world. And I think I went to bed that night having a nightmare about this beef, you know, because I had it, but I had to go to Christmas Eve and I had no temperature probe. So I couldn't, and this was like a commercial, but there was no temperature probe. And you need a temperature probe for, anyway, it was perfect. But, you know, when you have all these balls, you're juggling, this is how I described it. I'm juggling all these balls and then someone's throwing something at me, but you have to just not drop any of your balls. Catch their ball if you can. Don't drop anything. And but yeah, that relief at the end of the night when the boss comes in and shakes your hand and said, that was the best I've had of this. Once you're there, it's all worth it, you know. But and it's I love to be challenged. I just did a job for 6 months and I wasn't very challenged. You know, I was working on my own and the money was very good, but I was completely alone all day long and I was very unchallenged. So when I went and did this job, it was really hard, but it was great. It was great. It was like going from primary school to university, like in a day, you know, and suddenly doing much more complicated things. And it was, 104 hours in 7 days. I'm still quite impressed with this.
Yeah. You know, that's what they call the state of flow, when you're just challenged enough that you have to stretch a bit, but it still meets your overall skill set. That's when things are really fun.
No, absolutely. And with this job, whilst I was working so hard, this is I've only just done it, so it's a good example, but whilst I was working so hard, I was appreciated. And you won't get this in every job, but with that job, you know, they'd come in, shake my hand, you know, and that would gee me to work harder the next day. You know, I want to have that sense of satisfaction So when I drove away, I was like, job well done, you know, and it felt good. But you have these jobs where you get no feedback at all and it doesn't help them get better food, doesn't help you to know what you get right. So when you do get a job that gives you good feedback, it feels good.
Yeah, I mean, if you get good feedback and appreciation, that's a job to keep. You know, if things go well and there's a sense of appreciation overall, I think that goes a long way. And I think usually you can kind of tell by the stuff that's there. If you're going into a household where there are multiple people who've been there for decades, and you speak with them and you see that there must be a sense of appreciation, unless they're all nuts, which sometimes might be the case too. But generally speaking,
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
You see some jobs that are just advertised all the time. And you recognize the advert, you know what it is. Maybe you've gone there for a trial. Like, people got a lot of horror stories that we would never say online. But there are some jobs that they're just going to change chef every month, and that's just how they're going to be. But if the staff are happy, you know, I had one place I worked. Everybody was working, by the hour, paid by the hour, and everyone just went as slow as they could. Nobody liked the job, but they liked the money. You know, I think the staff turnover was massive, but everybody did everything as slowly as they possibly could because they were paid by the hour.
Yeah. But there's also not that's like working for a union, you know, do you really want? I've seen a couple of people come from Michelin-star restaurants going into union restaurants because they wanted to kind of earn a little bit more money for some time. But then they realize how awful it is to work in an environment where everybody thinks like that. Where, you know, you don't have a team that's actually pulling together to get shit done.
I never forget No, I mean, for me, I like that buzz. I like that, go, go, go of the whole thing. I don't drag my feet. I try not to. If I'm dragging my feet or staring at the clock, I'm in the wrong job. I'm working at the wrong place. If my heart is left the building, it's very unlikely I'll still be there in a month's time, because I know that I could be somewhere that I'm enjoying what I'm doing much more. And if you're a happy person, your food is better. It tastes better, it looks better, you care more.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's true for most things. I think if you're in a good mood, if you're happy, things just come out better. And that's true for food too.
Yeah.
Isn't that why the food from grandma's
That's what they say.
tastes so
Happy
good?
staff. Yeah, exactly. That's why, if something's made with love, you can just taste it. I'm sure you're the same. You go to a restaurant, you order something, and it's just disappointing, which is probably a bit of a curse of being a chef. Sometimes you just want to go out and let somebody else cook it, and then you're looking at it like, oh, you haven't done the chips fry or whatever. And it's just having that extra layer of pride. You're not doing it so you can get to the next check. You're not like rushing so you can finish for the evening. You are doing this because you want to have served the best version of that, or to make your boss really happy. It's not just a case of sending out the food. It's making your client happy. It's a very different thing.
And I think this is a crucial piece to the puzzle, is to have that attitude where you want to make the best food that you can possibly make in that moment and make the client happy. Generally, having that attitude will take people a lot further in our industry than just providing food, or just like cooking it and getting done with it. And I think people will pick up on that rather quickly.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Don't just cross things off a list so that you can go home. It's not like that. Don't think, you can't really plan. You can't say, I'll be home by 10 o'clock watching TV. You might not serve dinner till 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't look at it as just, if that's your life, if going to see your brother is something on your cross out list, or if going to the shops, you have to try and embrace everything in life. Otherwise you're just crossing things on a list, or you're in the wrong job. If you're not into every dish that you're sending, if you can't wait to see if they enjoy it, you're probably not the right person for the job. If you're not taking that kind of pleasure in somebody else and their appetite and enjoying your food, maybe you're not in the right job.
Yeah. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for sharing. I always like to ask one last question. What do you consider a life well lived?
A life well lived? I think for me, everyone has something different, what they would regret on their deathbed. And for me, I think to be successful, and successful is to have done something that made you happy. I don't mean money. I don't mean how big your house is. But if you're successful, that you are able to be happy and be your best. So I think that, life well lived is a life where you continue to learn and you're happy in success.
Nice. I like that. So where can people find you, connect with you, hire you?
I have an Instagram account, which is Foodle, like Foodle Noodle Doodle _LTD. But I'm about to, like I said, I'm not going to work for January. But I'm about to start a catering company, and I'm looking to start a food truck, and I'm also going to be doing a TV show of my own. So all these things are coming up. You can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah. So if you see a TV show called Mama Knows Best, that is me. I'm not a mama, but you'll see. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Samantha Kennedy. I do private bookings, private parties, and yes, I will be available after January.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.